Okay, live stream. Just 1 second. Did it go? Oh, all right. Okay, so good morning. Happy Sunday for all of us. It's a pleasure to be here, united with all of you guys here at Zoom, at YouTube, with the discarnate level. Thank you so very much for being here so then we can exchange all this good energy and then, right, get like refreshed for the week. Before I do the announcements for today, I would like to invite our sister Sunshine to do our opening, please.
Certainly. So I invite you all to please close your eyes. The outer eyes, that is, the eyes that connect us to the outside, to the material world. And let us visualize opening up our inner eyes. The inner eyes that look at God and all the energies, the spirit world, Jesus, the healing doctors, all of whom are here today with us. And before we connect more deeply with God, let us connect ourselves and ground ourselves with Mother Earth through our feet chakras. And let us say hello, dear Mother Earth. Thank you for keeping us connected. Thank you for nourishing us. Thank you for sustaining us. And let us now connect with our breath. And let us take deep cleansing inhales as we are imagining that God's love and light washes through us. And as we exhale, let us visualize all worries, all fears, all anger, sadness, leaving our field, being reabsorbed by dear Mother Earth, who is transmuting it. And we keep taking deep inhales and profound exhales. And let us now connect with our crown chakra, visualizing it opening alongside our third eye. And let us say hello, dear God. Dear God, thank you for being the first cause of all things. Thank you for your justice and your mercy. Thank you for your perfection. Thank you for your immutability, and thank you for creating this universe and us with so much beauty and harmony, with so much perfection. And thank you for sending Jesus our way, our guide and model, who has come before us, modeling to us, teaching to us, and loving us to connect us with you more deeply, to help us navigate our incarnations with more ease, with more love, with more charity, with more indulgence, forgiveness, and so much more goodwill. And let us also say hello to the healing doctors and our mentors and the mentors of this group with so deep felt gratitude for their love, their guidance, and their healing. And we're grateful that we have this opportunity this morning to gather and to open our hearts and minds to new teachings, to new concepts that will further help us to be more aligned with you, dear God. And we pray that all the mentors are supporting our brother Dan Assisi in his talk. And we also pray that we're attuned to each other in harmony and love. Thank you so much. And we humbly ask for permission to begin our meeting this morning. And so be it.
All right. That was beautiful. Thank you, sister. Okay, so everybody, welcome for coming to Bezerra Spiritual Healing Center. We are a non-denominational organization. We respect all religions, all spiritual traditions. So if you have any questions, anything about really anything that is spiritually related or religious related, we are more than happy to discuss. This is a safe space for us to have those types of discussions. So feel free to reach out to all of us. We are members of the United States Spiritist Federation, so all of our beliefs and our studies go around the scientific, philosophical, and religious principles from the Spiritism. So we study books from Allan Kardec, who was the one that codified Spiritism for all of us. And you will see that alongside the studying, we have another part of our session that is a hands-on healing. So the very first part, we are going to have someone speaking to us. I will introduce Dan Assisi in just 1 minute. But during this moment, it is really important that you practice your active listening. So your participation is important. So then your mentor can download to you all the messages that are important for you to reflect along the week. So we always kindly suggest that you have a piece of paper or something that you can take note for the parts that are important for you to go back and keep reflecting, because your mentor is already working with you. And then in the second part, we will have the hands-on healing, and that's why we always suggest that you bring the names of those who you want to bring for vibration and everything. So this is going to be the second part. In terms of announcements, we do have a lot going on, so we always have opportunities for us to be together, starting with the daily prayer. So St. Francis of Assisi, that today, by the way, we celebrate the day that he discarnate, October the 3rd in 1226, is when he returned to the spiritual world, while Allan Kardec in 1806 was incarnating to this beautiful world. So apparently October the 3rd is a very important day. But St. Francis of Assisi long ago told us that it is in giving that we receive. And that is really true. So everybody is invited to join us from Monday to Saturday, every 6 p.m., every day, 6 p.m. Pacific time. We do a 15-20 minutes prayer for us to emanate vibrations of love and healing, not only for each other, but also for the planet Earth. So everybody is welcome to join us through BSH Zoom link. We also have fraternal counseling, so every Wednesday, and this one is only by appointment. We suggested you schedule a time slot from 4 p.m. to 7 p.m. at the Pacific time, and one of the BSH mediums will be available to hear you, to talk to you, to pray with you. So we are here with open heart for us to be together. We are here with you and for you. So if you're willing to have a specific moment with us, you can reach out to any of us, any of the mediums, or you can always send an email to info@bsh.org, bshcenter.org, and we will find the medium that is available. In terms of classes, we have the book Light Ahead Study Group, and this is a series of lessons from various spirits through Chico Xavier. It's a beautiful book with a lot of inspiring lessons, and this class is an offering of BSH in collaboration with Divine Light, with our sister Sunshine Beck. So this one is every Tuesday from 6:30 p.m. to 8 p.m., everything in Pacific time. Again, with our sister Sunshine, you can find through Divine Light Zoom link, and I will post it on our chat box so you don't get lost. This last Friday, we just started a new book. So it was the book Action and Reaction. And in this book, Andrea Lewis, he explains how the existence of the human being is very deeply connected to the actions from our past lives and actions and attitudes from our present life, and how all of this influences in our realities for the future. So it's an amazing book. Everybody's welcome to join us. We just started, and this class is every Friday from 6:30 to 7:30, also with our sister Sunshine and Divine Light. We still have the Spirits Book study group every Thursday. And for those who don't know, the Spirits Book is the first book of Allan Kardec's series that unveils incredible details from the spiritual world through more than 1,000 questions. So he makes a lot of questions for the high spirituality. The answers are there, and we all debate, we all discuss that together. It's an amazing study. This one is every Thursday from 6:30 to 7:30 with our sister Duska, available on BSH Zoom link. We also have, right after that, we have the study of the book Happy Life. It's a small one, very beautiful and profound. This one is from Joanna de Angelis through Divaldo Franco. And this one is every Thursday, 7:35 to 8:05. This is right after the study of the Spirits group. And this is available Divine Light and BSH Zoom and YouTube. So again, everybody's welcome to join us. We are now heading to the end of the Spiritism for the Youth, which is a very beautiful and special way of bringing Jesus' message to our children. So we encourage everybody to support this next generation in this path. If you have anyone, if you know about anyone that wants to be introduced, this is a beautiful way of starting that. So this is every second and fourth Sunday of the month, Sunday of each month, from 8:30 to 9:30. Right before this service, also available at BSH Zoom and YouTube. And then last, but definitely not the least, every Sunday at 6 p.m. we have the Spirit's teaching of the Gospel according to Spiritism. So when we study the Gospel, after every chapter we have the interpretation from the high spirituality, and this is what we see. So we understand the Jesus' lessons with the lens of the Spiritism through the explanation from the high spirituality. So this class is also an offering from Divine Light with BSH via with Sunshine Back, and this one is via all the social media. So again, I'm going to post all the links so that nobody get lost. But in case you don't know where to go, the website has all the information. So bshcenter.org, and you will find everything in there with all the dates and etc. Yeah, so that was a lot. That was all the announcements. If anyone has any question, please feel free to reach out. We'll be more than happy to discuss with any of you. And today is a very, very special day. We have a very, very dear friend of ours here, Dan Assisi, and he will be speaking about a book that, something that became a book, right? As far as I understood, along his reflection, I'm sure that he will talk about that. But it's an amazing book. If you still didn't read it, grab it today, Our Road to Damascus. And for those who still don't know, Dan Assisi speaks on spirituality and spiritism in the US and internationally. Known for a mix of irreverence and deep thinking, Dan shares a message of hope and love through rational faith that both inspires and educates audiences about our spiritual nature, for sure. Dr. Assisi was featured in the Togetherness video series, an interfaith documentary on religious diversity and spirituality, and is a founding member of the Spiritist Institute. You can also find him as the host of the Infrequent Spiritist Conversations podcast. Daniel holds a doctorate degree in education and master's in public administration with a graduate certificate in public policy from the University of Southern California. He lives in San Diego with his wife Nicole and two sons, David and Vincent, one of them having a birthday party today. So happy birthday from him. And everybody, please help me to give a warm welcome to our dear friend, Dan. The stage is your friend.
Thank you very much, Kiki. And how long are we going to be together?
So we have 50 minutes, if that's okay.
Yeah, absolutely. So hello, everyone. It's wonderful to be with you. I always like to start by saying that Spiritism has given me two great gifts. One of them was the one I sort of expected, which was a different way of looking at the world and understanding things. which really changed my life in many different ways. But it's not really about me right now. But what I mean to say is that there's a second gift that was also received, and which I had no idea, but nevertheless is a really beautiful one. And it's the gift of getting to know people that you otherwise would never get to meet were it not for Spiritism. And I count you guys among those. So it's really wonderful to get to connect, even if it's virtually, right? But I think we're all used to it by now, to connect with folks in many different parts of this country, right? We have Denver, Arkansas, Florida, we have California, and it's just a wonderful, wonderful opportunity to be together in
You have
spirit.
New, we have New York too.
New York too, look at that. So it's really wonderful to have a chance to be together, right? And celebrate that side of ours that we often don't think about, our spiritual side. But anyways, our talk today, technically, is about our road to Damascus. And I say technically because, oops, let's see if I can do this. Maybe you can see my screen. Okay, there you go. And we have a little presentation that we can kind of work on together. But I was wondering if it makes sense to us to maybe do something slightly different within the topic. And we can cover the topic a little bit, and I can share with you the main ideas. And I wonder if you want to dive into one of those ideas a little bit deeper, or maybe have a conversation about it. The reason I say that is because there's quite a bit in there, and it's always hard to cover everything in great detail in a short amount of time. But I think that that's an interesting piece in general for us to be able to kind of talk about. So if that's okay with you, I'll give it an overall piece, and then we can talk about how the book came about, why the book came about, or we can just dive into one of the 7 different lessons that we take out of the book. Would that be okay?
Totally
Great.
fine, friend.
Yeah, and feel free to pop, questions in the chat there if you want, or comments or whatever have you, or if you want to, chime in as well. I really enjoy the opportunity that we have of talking together and interacting with each other. Okay, so I'm going to go ahead and share my screen here through my own little box on Zoom, because one of my pet peeves is that sometimes when we share things on Zoom, all you see is that PowerPoint, and you don't see anything else, right? And sometimes I can put people to sleep, so I'm going to try not to do that. And the way I try not to do that is by, getting a little bit creative every once in a while and trying to, put my face in there while we're talking, or just do different things. So I'm gonna try to keep you awake, is what I'm saying, right? Because I
We
do
definitely
think
won't sleep.
because I think that this story, the story of Paul of Tarsus, is an incredible one. And I say that not because it's something that we find in the Bible, or because Paul is certainly a spiritual Christian figure, but because I think that once we peel the layers away from our concepts of religion, or whatever it is that you want to think about, when you just looked at his life and his personal transformation, I think it's just fabulous that he was able to do so much and change so greatly. And I find that to be very contemporary for us, because once we take the varnish of religion, of Christianity, or whatever image you want to put in your head of conversion to a different faith, put that aside for a second for today's conversation. But let's just think about the man, right? That person going through this incredible life change that we'll talk a little bit about, and see if that resonates with your own life. Because I think in many different ways, his journey and this road to Damascus is an archetype. It's a symbolism. It's an allegory of this incredible spiritual change that all of us, without exception, are going to go through, have gone through, or are going through in our lives. And it's wonderful to have a model, to have something that we can look to see how that happened. Because I'm hoping that maybe it will bring a little bit of clarity to you, to us, to me, in our lives as we are going through change too. When we get to see what lies ahead and what other people have done, it becomes easier for us to find our own ways. Does that make sense? And so I spent quite a bit of time thinking about this, because I just think it's such a profound peace in general, right? This whole story of him, and obviously, I say that because I started to write an article about it, and folks said, maybe you should. I used to do these talks, and people say, "Oh, do you have something written about this? I'd like to go a little bit deeper, right? Dive a little bit more deeper." And I say, "Yeah, I'm going to sit down and write an article about it. I think like 10 pages will do it. We'll cover it quickly." And I did that. I started to sit down and write an article, and all of a sudden, I was on an introduction, and there was more than 15 pages. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to cut a lot of stuff down, right? And then it just kept coming and coming and coming, and I was like, oh, this is gonna be maybe like a 50-page, right, like essay. But it ends up being a little bit longer than that. But don't worry, it's not too long. So if you do want to read it, right, the whole piece, then it is in book format, and it is in ebook format as well. I'm happy to share that it's won a couple of awards, which was really wonderful in many different ways, because I love to get to see people reading what you wrote and what you have to think about. So that's a wonderful piece in general. But ultimately, what we really want to do, right, is talk about this guy Paul. And I think that we got to start there a little bit so folks have understanding, because we generally think of Paul as a special figure, maybe a saint, right? We even use the term Saint Paul, right? And I feel sometimes that puts some distance between us and Paul, like as if he were cut from a different cloth, as if he were something that was destined to greatness from the beginning, right? And we know him as the apostle of the Gentiles. A lot of Christianity, as we know today, we know because of Paul. If you pick up your Bible on the New Testament, which is the part that interests me the most of the Bible, you're going to see that there are 27 books on the New Testament, right? The New Testament is a book of books. And out of those 27 books, 13 of them are letters from Paul. One of them, the Acts of the Apostle, was written by Luke, which was Paul's companion as well, right? So like the majority of books of the New Testament and the way we get to know about Christianity today is really about Paul in many different ways. So much so that if you look a little bit closer, this is all the walking that he did back in the day, right? He transformed himself in such a way that he went through all of the known world talking about this new idea, this new perception, this new faith, this new way of looking at spirituality in the world. I mean, it's a lot. And like it puts to shame any frequent flyer these days. And that was all basically on foot, on horseback, right? And boat every once in a while. But he would be racking up those miles nowadays. And so he was really driven to share with people this passion, this thing that came to him. And that's a really beautiful thing. And then sometimes we forget that before Paul was all of that, before he was this great messenger of Christianity, he really was Saul. That's his given name. That's how he was born, Saul of Tarsus, right? And so we need to talk about this because sometimes we just see the end result of the transformation and we don't know all the work that went into it. And it's good for us to remind ourselves that Saul started just like us, perhaps even a little more behind than us. But he was able to make his way through this different this road of life, if we can say that. And so let's dive a little bit deeper into this road that he went through, and let's share a little bit about this story that we attribute to Paul, right? So it's important for us to first talk about Saul and know that he, from an early age, had wonderful access to a great education, to great parents. He was a privileged kid. He was smart. He was athletic. He had everything going for him. And he also was very dedicated to the idea of God and justice. And being born in the Jewish world, what he did was he dove into Jewish law. In Jewish law at the time, you also have to understand, which is a little bit different for us, doesn't really separate traditional law as we have in religion. It's one and the same. For us in our society today, we have this distinction between state and church. But that wasn't really the case 2,000 years ago for Saul and most of Jerusalem, right, in general. And so it's important for us to notice that Saul, being very driven, quickly rose to the ranks. He was studious. He put his effort into it. He became a rabbi of sorts. And then he ascended to eventually what we call the Sanhedrin, which is the top of the Jewish body of law. right? He was in Supreme Court, so to speak, of Judaism at the time at a very early age. And one of the reasons ways in which he did that was by really being a great defender of that faith, by going out and making sure that people were doing a good job of communicating what Judaism was intended or was perceived to be at that time. And that included also quashing this little cult that had started, this little cult of the followers of the way, as it was known back then. That is, the followers of Christ, this prophet from Nazareth that had just been crucified. But there were pockets. There were pockets of people that were starting to talk about slightly different things, and Paul wouldn't have it. So he would go to different places. He would talk to them, and he would arrest them. He would make them, go to prison. And some of that included eventually meeting Stephen. And Stephen is the first martyr of Christianity. And he was one of those speakers that would talk to people about this beauty of this slightly different new perspective about spirituality that came from this man, Jesus of Nazareth. And in the process of doing that, Stephen eventually got stoned because of Paul. And you can read this wonderful story. I'm not going to tell you because the book, Paul and Stephen, does a job of telling that way better than I possibly do. But it's a wonderful story of two people in their lives. But what you should know is that Paul does fall in love with Abigail, which happens to be Stephen's sister. It's really a wonderful, beautiful story. But when he realizes that she is his sister, and it was a long story, convoluted story, beautiful story, he decides he cannot marry her because that's going to hurt his career. He cannot be associated with a Christian. And so he breaks that engagement up. Eventually, he regrets. And he goes back to her. And when he returns to her, he finds that she too has converted to Christianity. Not only that, but she is now dying. And so he doesn't have a lot of time with her. She eventually dies. And he becomes obviously frustrated and very angry, right, with life in general, because the one person that he loved not only died, but converted to Christianity, which is something that he could not fathom, he could not understand. And so in that moment of rage, he decides to go after another preacher, another speaker that was talking up a storm about Christianity and who had gone to Damascus and who also happened to be the one who had talked to Abigail and helped her convert to Christianity. So there was a personal reason here besides the religious one, right? Besides his job of defending the faith, he was also perhaps wanting to get Ananias, which was the name of this talker, this preacher that had gone to Damascus. And so he decides, as a member of the Sanhedrin, to ask for permission from the larger body, from the larger group, to go from Jerusalem to Damascus. And he goes with 3 more people because it's a little bit of a long journey. It's in a road much like this one over here, right? There were no Motel 6s, there were no credit cards, there were no 7-Elevens along the way, right? You just put all the stuff in the back of a horse and camels and all the good stuff, mainly horses, right? And you made the journey because it was also safer to go together as a group. And as he goes, about 120 miles, the distance between San Diego and Los Angeles, for instance, right, on horseback riding, that's not something that you do in a day, right? It would take you a couple of days to do that, especially when you have to stop. So it's a long journey. And along that journey, with his companions, a couple of things happen that are really interesting. And that's what I think gets fascinating for us. And why do I say that? I say that because almost arriving at Damascus, he perceives a light to shine from the top. And that light is so impactful that knocks him off the horse on his butt onto the floor. And guess what? That light, that incredible light, happens to be Jesus speaking to him and asking him the question, Saul, Saul, why do you persecute me? And in the moment, taking back what must have been an incredible emotional experience, he realizes that he has been persecuting this idea, these things, and that it does not make sense anymore. And so he asks back. He says, Lord, what would you have me do? And we'll talk about that a little bit later on. But in that courageous moment, he understands he has to change things. And then he hears the response, go to Damascus and wait. And then that brief encounter is over. And he finds himself one more time in the middle of the dusty road to Damascus. But here's what's else that's interesting. He's on the ground hurting after that incredible encounter, which I think we can all agree is not something that happens to us every day, right? But his friends, remember the three other guys that were hit with him? His companions that worked for him, that were helping him lug all this stuff, they did not have this encounter. They did not see the Christ. They were not privy to that conversation. So they look at his friend, at his boss, right, Saul, on the ground, telling them that he has had a mystical encounter with the Christ. And I think that they think he's cuckoo bananas, right? Maybe the sun got to him because it's a long journey, right? And why would he fall off his horse out of nowhere and now talks about like the Christ, the very thing that he was persecuting? So his companions, his traveling companions, are worried because their boss fell on the ground and he's not doing too well. So they want to go back. They want to go back to Jerusalem and say, let's get him back because it's also our job in the line. What happens to him? What if something happens to him, right? And they go back and forth in this. And Saul says, no, I'm going to go to Damascus, whether you go with me or not. So what they decide to do is one of them decides to go with Saul. The two of them go back to Jerusalem to let them know what was happened. And so Saul and the other person they go forth, and they eventually find Jerusalem, and they knock. They go forward to Damascus, and they knock on people's doors in Damascus that they know when they get there, right? Because Saul was a political figure. He was an important guy. He was known, right? Anybody would covet the opportunity to host him because that would be a social thing. Like, oh, Saul stayed in my house, right? Kind of thing. Like Barack Obama came and stayed in my house, kind of thing, right? It was a big deal. It was a big deal. But guess what? Nobody wants to host him all of a sudden because he starts talking about this Christ revelation that he's had. And everybody's like, hold on a second. That's not going to end up well with the authorities, right? That's not what I believe in. So Saul all of a sudden finds himself without a place to go. And he has to go to an inn, right? Which is for us, an inn seems like something that you do, right? By Motel 6 or where have you. But inns at the time were not really that common. They were like a spare room in somebody's house or in somebody's business, where you just kind of rented, and they were not exactly wonderful places to be, right? It's where you go when you don't have anywhere else to go because nobody likes you, kind of thing. He does find a place there. He stays a couple there. Oh, did I tell you, by the way, of the small detail that after he was knocked off his horse, he was blind? He could no longer see. So he's now walking around, right, blind, being literally led by his companion, who is afraid that they're going to start thinking that the companion is also believing in Christ, right? And his job was to work for the Sanhedrin. So he's like, it's not going to work well. Saul realizes that and says, all right, you go back home. I will wait. So Saul is left without much money, without much hope, in this forgotten inn in a street called Straight. It's a straight street in Damascus, according to the Acts of the Apostles in the New Testament. And there he waits for a couple of days. Eventually, guess what happens? That guy he was persecuting, Ananias, also has had an encounter with the Christ. The Christ has shown himself to him and said, Ananias, do you know Saul of Tarsus? And he said, yes, that man that has been persecuting people and that has been killing people, I know him. And the Christ says, go to an inn in the street called Straight and heal him. And I can only imagine Ananias' face at that point in time, right, in that communication. Christ, Lord, do you want me to go and talk to that guy that's been, are you sure that it's that Saul that you want me to go heal, right, and help? But he goes to his testament, right, to the testament of his own faith. He obeys that request from the Christ, goes and lays hands upon Paul, and then you might know the story. As if scales had fallen from Paul's eyes, he can see again after receiving passes. and he is healed. And from there, a transformation begins in his life. He begins to call himself Paul after a while, right? And from hero, Saul means the great, and Paul means the small. So he purposely changes his name to signify this difference. And so it is this symbolic conversation that we want to have really quickly, because we won't have a lot of time, but you can dive deeper later. In this, scenario, that we say, all right, let's look at 7 different items for reflection from his story. And we can choose a lot more, but 7 seems like a nice number, right? And that gives us something to go to. So let's look at that and see how that goes, if that's okay with you. I'll stop to breathe there because I have a tendency to talk really quick. People tell me all the time, slow down, Dan. So if that's also the case, let me know. But the first thing that I think is fascinating and really wonderful, the first lesson that we can take from Saul's journey to Damascus, is that he was in a group, but he was alone. In that journey, as he was going those 120 miles or whatever days, even though he sure had wonderful conversations with his group of people that he enjoyed being on the road with, because you're on the road for 7-10 days, right, with a group of people, you are going to get to know them. And you're probably going to choose people to go on that journey with you that you like, right? And so even though he was in a group of persons, right, there were 4 of them, only he saw that light. And I wonder if there isn't a beautiful message to us in our lives too, that even though we may surround ourselves with a wonderful group of people, our family, our friends, there is a moment or moments in this existence where an opportunity to dive deeper into who we truly are and make some key choices in our lives are going to present themselves. And it's going to feel lonely because nobody else might understand it. Nobody else can take those decisions for us. It is our moment. And that's really hard because sometimes we want that cuddling, we want that connection, we want that support from people. But it is up to us to make that choice. Because not everybody's on the same timing. Not everybody's on the same road. But it's up to us. And that is something really hard because we lose people in many different ways along the road, right? Paul lost a couple. 2 of them returned halfway through it. And one, when he reached Damascus, also went back. So he was at the end of his journey by himself. He felt pretty alone. But alone doesn't have to be lonely when you hold on to your ideals. And we can talk a little bit more about this later if we have a little bit of time. But we're going to lose people along the way. Some people are going to discard it, pass away, die. Some people are going to go to different parts of the country, and their lives are naturally going to take a different course. Some people are maybe going to disagree with what we're doing. And that's okay too. But we have to be okay with that because it is our journey. We can't live our journey for other people. And so there's a lot here that we can talk about, but we're going to set this one aside as the first powerful lesson that Paul gives us on this journey to Damascus. The second lesson along the journey is also a very powerful one. It is the one that there is a destabilizing meeting with destiny at times. Sometimes our perception of what spiritual enlightenment looks like is angels coming from the skies, clouds parting, beautiful music playing around, light shining from everywhere, and we just glowingly ascend to heavens because now we are an enlightened being. But the truth is that we learn through strife. We learn through difficult moments. And if you find that sometimes hard to believe, let's look at the example of Saul. The way that he got to meet the Christ is by falling off his horse in the middle of the dusty desert. It hurts. If you ever fallen off a horse, and I have, it hurts, right? If you literally have done it before, right? So here he is falling to the ground. But it is that moment. It is that difficult challenge of the moment that has us to realize that perhaps the ways in which we are going are no longer well suited to lead us to happiness. Sometimes life has to intervene. Sometimes our spiritual mentors let it happen because we need a wake up call. We need to change. And it's only when we deal with the uncomfortable that we grow. And so Saul had a destabilizing meeting with the Christ. It wasn't one in which he attained enlightenment. It wasn't one in which, so to say, Jesus called him to the rug and say, hey, why are you persecuting me? Which means, why are you going against these ideas? He did it in the most loving way, as we can only imagine, of course. But that was a powerful wake-up call to Saul. So I wonder if there isn't a parallel in there to our lives, in which the moments that trouble us the most, the challenges that we face the most in our lives, are not the ones that we are going to learn from the most. I wonder if those really hard moments don't require us to reframe our perspective and say, this is not a challenge that's putting me down. This is something that's going to build me up. But what's the lesson here? What do I need to do? What are the changes that it will necessitate in my life? And that's a really powerful awareness, a really difficult one as well. But it lets us see hardship, not as punishment, but an opportunity for growth, if we know the long story. Because if you think about Saul, do you think that at the end of his life, he would look back into that moment as one of hardship or growth? He certainly will be grateful that he had that experience at that point in time. And that happens to us too, right? Sometimes we have hard moments in our lives where later on, with the benefit of wisdom and time, we say, you know what, that was actually good for me. So can we learn? Can we learn for these hard moments? I think is a second lesson from Paul. And we could stay here the whole evening talking about this. I think there's a lot from Paul that we could learn there. But let's move on a little bit. And the third lesson that we have from Paul along the way is the courageous question he asks. You see, when Christ shows himself to him and says, why do you persecute me? What Paul does not do or does not say, I find it more important than what he does say. Because if it were me, if Christ showed up and say, then why do you persecute me? I would probably go, hold on, Jesus, I didn't know. I'm sorry. I just didn't know who you were. But now that I felt it, I am sorry. You know, all these reasons, I wanted to do things right. None of that takes place in that conversation. Saul realizes in that moment that he needs to change. And he asks the question, Lord, what would you have me do? And it's courageous because he's not looking for excuses of why it has happened before. He's not looking for understanding of what he has done. He's also admitting in that question that he does not know what's next. He's just opening himself up and saying, I don't know where to do now. I know I was wrong. I know there are things I could change in my life, but I don't know how to do it. What should I do? I don't know. And that's a beautiful moment of opening yourself up to the universe and understanding that sometimes, or a lot of the times, we don't have the answers. And that is okay. We could also spend tons of time here, as you can imagine. But that's a beautiful awareness that we must take into consideration, because sometimes we don't have the courage ourselves to ask that question. We're so afraid of life that we decide not to ask it. We decide to stay where we are, in the relationships that we have, in the places that we live, in the jobs that we work at, because we know that we need to change, but we are afraid of asking that question. but he does that. And that's a very courageous moment. It's very courageous to say, I don't know. We could use that more in our lives, in our society. And that's okay too. So there's a lot that we can unpack there psychologically for what kind of question this was, why it happened, what other things we need to do there, and where do we go from here. But it's a powerful awareness for us to know that even somebody as figured out as Paul was by the end of his life, in that moment, he just didn't know where to go and he needed to ask for help. And we can too. We can ask for help through prayer, through meditation, through guidance, through our people who we trust. Because you don't ask for tax advice from your mechanic, right? And you don't ask for medical advice from your lawyer. You have to know where to go to get the advice that you need. And when it comes to spiritual matters, when it comes to emotional matters, one of the greatest things we can do is ask for advice from above. And that's prayer. But anyways, I digress because I like to talk, as you can tell. So, what is the fourth lesson that we can take away from Paul? Well, the fourth lesson is a really beautiful and powerful one too. After he asked that question, after he had that encounter with the Christ, after he knows that his life has to change, he found himself blind. He could not see anymore. And that's very allegorical in many different ways. Because after you commit or are committing to making a change in your life, or during that moment, you feel blind. You don't know where things are anymore. You don't know how to orient. You don't know where to go. You don't know what to do. We experience sometimes this moment of spiritual blindness too, or even cognitive blindness when we just don't know what's up or down anymore. And sometimes we look out into the world and we just don't know how the world can be this way either, because the blindness in many different ways is us learning to see and understand things anew. We're rejecting the way we used to see the world, and we don't have it all figured out just yet, but we know that the way we saw and acted upon the world was not enough for us. And now it's very confusing. Now I don't know where to go. And if you think about it, collectively, we had 2 years of this. We are in the process of this COVID revolution, where many of us are saying, I don't want to go back to my old life. It wasn't enough for me. I kind of knew it, or maybe I didn't, but I don't want to go back to that job. I don't want to go back to that lifestyle that I had. And so we don't know where to go. It's confusing. We don't know what's ahead. It causes a lot of anxiety. But we know that something needs to change, and we need to kind of figure that part out. So if you are experiencing confusion in your life, if you don't know exactly where you're going or what you're doing, or feel like you should know more, maybe you are in this period of change where you're trying to make sense of things, where your old view of the world as it should be no longer works for you, and you're seeking for a different way forward. The good news is you're not alone, because it lasts only for a while, right? Eventually, you get to see again. And something else that happens at the same time as we go through the road is, it is in that moment of blindness, of difficulty, that we have to make the decision. And this is a really beautiful but hard decision. Because when we are in the moment, hurt, falling from the horse in the middle of the road to nowhere, dusty, with people not understanding where we want to go, maybe telling us that we should go back to what we were before because that's safer, we have to make a decision. We know which way Saul went. He decided to go to Damascus, not to go back to Jerusalem. And the question that lingers in the air is, will we choose to go forward to Damascus, to something new, something we haven't quite figured out and we don't know what it looks like? Or are we going to make the decision to go back to what is safe, what is known, which is our Jerusalem? It's a decision that we have to make. Only we can make that for ourselves. And if you find yourself in the same position in life many times, I wonder if that's not because we have been going back to Jerusalem every time that we are exposed to that challenge. Maybe it's a job, maybe it's a relationship, maybe it's a growth issue, maybe it's a physical issue. But we're not making new choices. So we keep going back and having that same experience again in the middle of the road. That scares us. And then we go back to safety again. And we repeat that cycle. To break that cycle, we need to make the decision to go ahead, even if it's a really hard one. So, will we choose to go back to Jerusalem? Will the world choose to go back to a pre-COVID existence where we think things were okay, but they were not okay? We knew it. It was not okay for everybody. Are we going to go back there? Or are we going to try to move forward to something new that can be confusing and messy and difficult, but we know that can be better? That's a decision that lingers to each one of us and the road ahead. But our time is short, so we move on. We could stay there for a little longer, as you can tell. We move forward to a great news. The sixth lesson that we learned from Paul and Saul on the road to Damascus is that we always get unexpected help. We are by now worried about the loneliness, the confusion, the pain, the doubt. But the good news is that we always get expected help. Do you think that Saul expected that it would be Ananias that would come to heal him? Can you think of the irony of having Ananias be the one that saves or helps Paul? The very own person he was persecuting, the very one thing that he went to Damascus after to imprison, kill, or bring back, or whatever you have it, was the one that helped him. And I wonder if there isn't another beautiful symbolism in there for us. That the things that we think are the worst in us, or that we want to escape from, or that we feel are the challenges with other people, are actually the stuff that we need. Actually, the stuff going to help us liberate ourselves from our current state of mind, or suffering, or shortcoming. And there's also another great piece of news here, people. Ananias could only find Saul in that inn in the street called Straight Street in Damascus, which was the main street in Damascus, because Christ knew where he was at all times. Otherwise, how could Ananias find him? Since he was alone, he didn't know where he was going to be. It's because spirituality and the good spirits are always following our steps. They know where we are. And in fact, as Saul is struggling with making sense of all of that, Christ is having that conversation with Ananias, already having him go there. So spirituality, our mentors, our guides, are already helping us, even when we don't know, preparing us, giving us that help that's going to come. The question that stays and that begs to be answered is, do we realize that help is coming? And more importantly, do we know who is or what is our Ananias? If you showed up in our door today, do we know where the expected help is going to come from? Because truth is, we always get help. It might not come in the ways that we expected or wanted to come, but there's always help. So it's on us to realize whether it's a circumstance, an event, somebody else, where is that helping coming from? Can we recognize it? Can we use it? Can we leverage it? That's an important piece. And because, again, our time is short, we move ahead here. But the seventh item that we want to kind of briefly talk about is Damascus itself. Saul left Jerusalem thinking he was going to arrive at Damascus and that he would do these things in Damascus. So Damascus presented itself to him in a specific way. But I think we can agree that the Damascus that he arrived at after going through that road was not the Damascus that he had envisioned he would arrive at. It was the same city, mind you. It was the same place, and he did get there, but it was fundamentally different than that which he imagined was going to be. And I think I think there's a big lesson for us there too. What is our Damascus? What are our goals? What are the things that we think are going to make us happy? Because it might be that in the middle of a road, we change standards on what we think is going to make us happy, what we think success is. And that's very okay. But are we constantly reevaluating what our goals in life are, what our Damascus is? Maybe early on, our Damascus was having a beautiful house, a car, a great bank account, and all of those things are wonderful. I'm not saying don't do that, but I'm saying ultimately it's up to you to find out where your happiness comes from. What is your Damascus? Where is it that you want to arrive at? That's an important question too. So, all of that to say, as we look at this wonderful journey that Saul does in a symbolic way along the way, we understand that we might be in a group, but we have to make our own decisions, and that it might feel lonely sometimes, but that we're not alone. And that challenges come sometimes to help us move forward, to call our attention to things that we need to address, because if we don't address them, maybe things go worse in our lives. So these destabilizing meetings we have with destiny are really good things. Now, the challenge is, will we have the courage to ask the questions of ourselves that we need to ask during those moments to decide whether we truly want to change? And even in the middle of that confusion and the blindness that comes when we're learning to see the world anew with our new perspective, we will have to make a choice between going back to what we were, what we held as comfortable, or move forward into the unknown. The truth is, oftentimes, to make space for the new, we have to let go of the old. That's harder. That's hard because we want to let go of the old only when we have the new. But sometimes it doesn't work that way. You have to make space for it. But the good news is that when we make that decision to move it forward, there's always help. There's always unexpected help that comes to us. And eventually we get to go and arrive at our Damascus, even if it has changed. And it's not the only time we're going to go to our Damascus. Our journey will be forevermore ongoing. We might have to go through this many different cycles. But the good news is, whenever we do that, whenever we transform ourselves with that spiritual knowledge that we are now really clearly getting from the spirits, we know that these teachings that come from this older brother of ours, the Christ, lets us live forever, because there is no death when you believe in the Spirit. That's why I think the Christ said that he's the resurrection and life, that these teachings are the resurrection and the life, because if you really internalize that in your heart, you never get to die. And all people around you and everyone you love never gets to die either. Isn't that wonderful? Think about this for a second. Everybody that you have ever met and cared for and loved still lives on, even if you cannot see them. Now, that should be reassuring, because we don't stop loving those who have gone, do we? So why do we think that they would stop loving us? Now, add to that another layer of knowledge that we have reincarnated many times. So imagine how many more people you are unaware of, but that have loved you through many incarnations, that continue to love you. Mothers, fathers, brothers, siblings, children, friends. Imagine that. How many of them are out there that we just don't know and to just love us tremendously? Ah, that's life transforming. We can be in a group and feel alone, but we're never really truly alone. We feel it, but we are not, because there's an ever-ending waterfall of love towards us from the spiritual realms and from here on earth too. So as we think about all of this, as we think about all these wonderful things that are happening in our lives, let's embrace that challenge. Let's make that road to Damascus, our own road to Damascus, whatever it is that we want it to be. And never forget that you are loved beyond measure and recognition, and that you are going to succeed, and you're going to be more wonderful and more incredible than you can ever imagine. So I hope that the example of Saul and Paul stays with us. And I'm glad that we have this time together. And of course, if there's anything I can do to help you along your journey, you let me know. Yeah.
Oh my God, damn. It is hard to say anything because it is so thoughtful, and it is a beautiful story, and the way that you understood and translated that into the 7 steps, it is so important for all of us. And I think that, and this was interesting too, because when I was reading the book, as I was reading, I could make those analogies with my own life, and then that helped me tremendously. So thank you so much. Thank you. Yeah, I think it's inspiring. We were at the beginning, we were just discussing about all the changes that we are all going through, and then like physical changes, emotional changes, and all, like everything, and how all of this comes into our transformation, our inner transformation, going to our next life better than what we started this one. So it was beautiful. It was very inspiring. Thank you so very much. Thank you.
Thank you. And thank you, Paul. Paul and our older brother Christ, to continue to show us the way. I like
Yeah.
to say that they've left us pretty shiny footsteps, right? We can see them even in the dark if we really look for. It's incredible what we have access to. It's just amazing. And thank you for sharing the time with me.
Yeah.
And what is very, very beautiful, the way you bring to us, think that we would not stop and think about the moment when Paul fell from the horse. If, like you said, you have been there. I have been there, not from a horse, but from a car. And my car flipped from the bridge to the river, no? So, and then in the moment of the power, because, riding a horse is a powerful too. Driving a car, you feel, if the car is potent, you feel powerful too. So when that break you, like my case, break me in half, I broke 3 vertebrae, 3, 9, 10, and 11, exploded. So in that moment, it's like breaking all your ego, all your prideness. And I read the book many times. I love the book. The story of Paul is very inspiring. But I never stopped to meditating in that. How did he feel in that moment after he fell from the horse? And you brought that so nicely to us to reflect in our days, in our life. How many times in our lives that we fall from a step, we just turn our feet and make us to fail, and a bicycle or any other ways that life have a way to stop us. How did you start from that? Have you start to stop and stop and think, why did you, that life is advising you on that situation? So how many times we have on our side a friend, a spiritual friend, a master like Jesus, and we have on our side Ananias. How many times? No, and we may have not paying attention, and for that. So is a very wonderful to have you with us. I think this book have transformed your life too. I think you just not writing that. What I feel in that in your book is like you sharing with us the transformation of the road of Damascus in your life too, because what you bring to us from that book, it is not just the Paul story. It is Paul represent all of us. And as your life change in a great way, and I'm so appreciate that you change, you want to share with us the exact way Paul shared and go and work and serve. And you are doing in our modern days, showing to us how to transform your life in putting in pages, putting paragraphs, making us thinking. Your book is a book that I recommend to everybody for inner transformation. And even if you read and didn't got the message, read again, because that is a very, for our days, it is a very important message for all of us, bringing the message of Paul to our days. I love that. Thanks so much. And I hope maybe one day we can have a more time, that you will have find your time too, because we know your schedule is very busy. But we can have like hours, and then you can make
A workshop of sorts. Yeah. Uh-huh.
would be
Yeah.
great. I
Yeah.
appreciate you with us, and oh my gosh, I have 4 pages of notes over here just in this. Thanks so very much. I appreciate your time.
No, thank you. Thank you for the kindness. I mean, it's wonderful to be here. And I think that's the wisdom of the gospel. When we are able to break this image that we made, that these are old people that lived 2,000 years ago and dressed and spoke differently, when we put sneakers and jeans on them, right? When we bring them to our Starbucks, when we like think about them as people just like you and I, without, instead of being people with weird names that are far away from us, we see that their stories are so like our stories. Like we could reframe Paul when we could say, oh my God, in the middle of the road of a business trip, he decides that his job is no longer it for him. And so I mean, he has the courage to say, I'm just going to quit my job. And I don't know, I don't have anything lined up, but I'm just going to quit my job and I'm going to find something else. I don't know what it is. I don't know how I'm going to live, but what I'm doing is harming people. I can't do that anymore. Wow. Right? Because we talk about conversion, we talk about Christianity, like these are big terms, but put it in your life. Like I might just pick up and move cities because my life is taking me there. That's a big change. I might change jobs, right? So there's so much wisdom in that story, and we know the ending of those stories, and we know how impactful they can be. So what a blessing that we have, right? And I'm really appreciative for your kind words, Tanya, and I'm really glad to be here with you guys in general. And of course, you guys can always, get in touch via social media, send me emails or whatever have you. Of course, I'd love to do a workshop on this thing. Clearly, I'm biased, right? I really enjoy this in general, but thank you for the time here and for the kind words. And there's so much. Oh my goodness, right? Like you talked about falling on the ground, and in the book make a parallel to the ground. I think there's a great symbolism. We can't go more than the ground. The ground is where really we are. But we just think that the car, the horse, right? We just think it's like this is who we are. We can go this fast, but that's not us. No, we make that assumption. It's not a great assumption. All that we lose sight of who we truly are. Right? But anyways, I'm gonna stop here, and because I know that we have time issues. Thank you, thank you for being you, and thank you for having me.
Thanks, Daniel. I think you would be awesome in giving a workshop. You have a great way of expressing, I think it's pretty awesome. I think your education worked for you.
Oh, thank you, Regina. That's really kind of you to say that. And it's great to see you too, by the way.
Yeah, it's good to see you.
Been a while.
Yeah, it has, huh? Don't be a stranger.
If you invite me, I'll come.
Okay.
Watch out.
All right. All right.
All right, everybody. So again, once more, thank you so much. I think everybody can find Dan Assisi in any social media, but if anyone would like to reach out for more comments or more questions, just let us know. We'll be happy to introduce one another. Yeah, so thank you so much. We are going to take 2 minutes break and we will resume for our second part. Then you are more than welcome to stay. We know that you have some schedule, but feel free to stay here. We do a healing meditation and then we are good for the day.
Thank you. I'm going to unfortunately bow out because I need to pack some box juices into a cooler to take for a birthday party right now. A very excited 8-year-old. I hope that's okay with you guys.
Of
So
course,
please
bring all
stay
of
with
our
my
love
love.
to your son. Yeah, bring all of our love to your son, to your family. Have a beautiful party, and thank you so much.
Right back
Brother
at you
Daniel,
guys.
thank you so much. Thank you so much.
Thank you, friends. God bless you.
Bye. See you guys in 2 minutes.
So, Kiki,